Also thrilled to be joined by Philip Jackson, Chief Commerce Officer at Something Digital and co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, Future Commerce. Philip will be moderating our breakout panel later on in the webinar, so stay tuned for that. A little more about the brands represented here today. Gorgeous is an e-commerce help desk that turns your customer service into a profit center. Definitely check them out to generate additional revenue easily from your customer service. Next, we have Klaviyo. Think of Klaviyo as the central command center for all your digital marketing needs. With email marketing, dynamic website content, social retargeting, SMS marketing, and more, you'll take back control of the customer experience and own your e-commerce growth. For today's brand spotlight, we have Highlight, creator of premium performance athletic apparel, built for the modern athlete, priced for everyday use. We're actually giving away 3 $150 gift cards to Highlight based on participation in chat. So if you want to enter and kick things off, tell us where you're tuning in from, or we already know one's tuning in from the Philippines, and the name of your store. And then finally, Something Digital is an interactive agency specializing in e-commerce, website design, digital marketing, and user experience. For strategic, creative e-commerce solutions, check out their services. All right, enough introductions. You're probably sick of hearing from me anyway. Welcome, panel.
Sorry, I had to unmute to make sure to interrupt your presentation. Thanks, Mary.
And then Lucas, if we can just hit the next slide.
There we go.
So now for a look at today's agenda. First up, we'll be examining COVID-19 insights, outcomes, and trends to monitor. Then we'll review best practices to build long-lasting relationships. Gorgeous and Highlight will take us through specific engagement tactics that drive sales. And finally, we'll close out the webinar with a moderated discussion and Q&A. So let's get to it. Panel, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. Hey, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. Joe McCarthy, as Mary mentioned, from Klaviyo's marketing team. We're going to kick off the webinar by sharing some of the insights and outcomes and trends that you should be aware of and monitoring. Lucas, if you don't mind advancing. So just to refresh everyone, if you are familiar with Klaviyo, and if you're not, as Mary mentioned, we are the central command center to help you and merchants grow their businesses. We have over 400 employees, 36,000 customers in 82 countries. We're most well known for our work in the e-commerce space and with email specifically, but we do much more than that. We help brands grow from day one and beyond through email, SMS, on-site forms, and it's all powered by segmentation, analytics, and data. Now, what happened when COVID started? As you all know, we've gone through quite a transition. And what we saw on the next slide, Lucas, we started to really think through what was happening to the e-commerce space and what brands really needed to know. We launched 2 surveys in mid-March, one that was focused on brands and understanding the daily challenges and the results that they were seeing, and another that was focused on consumers, what they were spending on and what they were really challenged with and what they were having trouble finding, for example. We combined that polling data that has over 10,000 responses now, and we've merged it with the data from our actual customer base to really corroborate and understand at a much more detailed level of granularity exactly what was happening. And what we've done since then is really look to share the insights with brands so they could really understand what to be focused on with and really how it was potentially impacting them, and also what to expect in the near term. If you go to the next slide, Lucas, the big thing that we have found is now is truly time for e-commerce. What we had seen as we were monitoring the news reports was that overall, consumer spending was reported as being down. And while that is the case overall, what we found was that specifically on e-commerce, many consumers had shifted. What you can see here was one of the first findings that we uncovered. There was a new classification of products. What we found as we were polling consumers and looking at the verticals that were really popping was that certain items like CPG products, food and beverage, which we classify as essentials to daily life, they were seeing an uptick. You can see starting in March, especially around March 15th, And what we really found were items that we classified as new essentials, things like toys and hobbies, health and fitness products, beauty and cosmetics were really growing. Actually, Lucas, yeah, thank you. What we found was that those new essentials were truly seeing a major uptick. You can see that again in the 315 region is where they started to have this big trend. Those new essentials are things that consumers really felt like they needed to have while they were at home. When we dug into the products specifically, we learned that many consumers were focused on new health and fitness regimens. They needed new workout gear, for example. They were no longer able to go to the gym, so they needed new workout equipment. Similarly, we had a lot of responses saying that consumers were now focused on buying pots and pans because they were now going to be cooking 3 meals at home versus what they had done before. So a very specific trend in what was actually growing. And what we found, even for the products that we deemed as non-essentials like fashion, luxury apparel, jewelry, and accessories, ultimately those verticals ended up seeing tremendous growth as well because of the shift to e-commerce spending. Now, if we go to the next slide, what was particularly interesting when we dug into who was actually shopping, we found that their new purchasers were really driving the trend. Lucas, do you mind advancing? Thank you. So what you can see here is that repeat purchasers, repeat spending in the light green was fairly consistent across the start of from January 1st on. We had seen that it upticked a little bit as COVID came into play, but what we found was that consumers were out there discovering new brands. We heard directly from them that many of them were out there looking for new brands actively, either because they couldn't find a product that they needed, they were having trouble having that product be fulfilled, or they were just looking for different items than they had in the past. And you can see that tremendous growth up and to the right that carried all the way through April. And then we've updated this data recently, and we're still seeing the same trend be present, even as some states are starting to reopen. Now, if we go to the
Hey,
next slide.
Joe,
Yep.
so something that we found out this morning, so we didn't have time to update it to the slide, was taking a look at the data from China when it comes to e-commerce, is that they jumped from say 30% to 50% during COVID, but those trends are still continuing to grow. So if that's any sort of leading indication, this is only the start. And as you mentioned, we're going to start to see these growing.
Yes, it was actually very interesting to dig into the data by regions that opened. What we had actually found was that even in places where you were now able to go back and shop in brick and mortar stores, there were actually people were still no longer, they weren't able to go into the volume that they could in the past. So even in places where you could now shop in physical brick and mortar locations, folks were still turning to e-commerce because they're of new restrictions or hour changes, things of that nature. Now, one of the really big opportunities that we wanted to share is that knowing so many consumers are out there discovering new brands, we dug into the submission rates of forms, collecting email addresses on websites. And what you can see here is the tremendous growth that we saw in April. So right now, consumers are much more willing to share their information and start those relationships with brands because they have a definite need and they're out there. So it furthers that idea that there's such a big opportunity. Now, if we continue on, Lucas, the big change for us when we think about this is right now you have a big opportunity to focus on acquisition, to really think about driving traffic to your site and collecting that information. And as we mentioned, building those big relationships. Why we feel this is so important, we've found through our research that if we look at the down the road Black Friday and Cyber Monday, the relationships that you build now ultimately are of a higher value to you later. Come Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you'll see higher average order values from the individuals who you've started building relationships with now. And that's why it's so important to capture that information and start the process. The other thing that's really interesting about this, and we've heard this from many of the brands we work with, are that CPCs and CPMs are much lower than they had been in the past. So if there are channels that you're looking to advertise in or test, now is a great time to test them. But remember, come the fall, as things may shift and we get close to the holiday timeframe, those CPCs and CPMs could definitively increase and become much more expensive. So just plan accordingly. Now, on the next slide, we'll get into a quick idea of how Klaviyo thinks about actually building relationships. Are you guys able to see the screen? My screen.
Yeah, it's I was adjusting my positioning of the monitors, so hold on.
I'll voice over
There we
this
go.
while we go.
No, that was my fault. It was hard to go back between the chat box and then my second monitor with the slides, so I was trying to readjust the everything. But here we go, good to go. Apologies for that.
Perfect. Technology, it always gets the best of us.
It is, and
Sorry,
especially
as many Zooms as we go through.
and the work from home second monitor that's in a weird position as well. Awesome. So are we on the right side, Joe?
Still be on white. Do you mind refreshing, Lucas?
Yeah, I'll pause sharing for a moment.
Well, while we're on that topic, so the way that Klaviyo thinks about building relationships, it happens just like humans do in daily life. So it's all based on the concept of listening and understanding exactly what your customer is sharing with you through their behaviors and through their preferences, understanding it specifically, so processing all of that information, and then really acting upon it and communicating back to the customers using all of the information that you just learned. It's very simple. We do this on a daily basis, and it's the same way that you should approach it through your marketing channels with those customers. On the next slide, you can see the channels that we really believe in. At Klaviyo, we're all about own marketing. And when it comes to own marketing, that's the idea of owning the customer experience from start to finish, delivering great experiences that are going to build long-lasting relationships. And the channels where you can do that best are through email, website, and mobile. Now, we talked a little bit about email before, but let's just dig in quickly with 2 examples from Highly, and then John's going to get into this much more in depth later. But why are brands and consumers favoring email right now, especially, but always, is that email gives you a true way to own the experience, to really communicate your brand's unique presence, communicate to individuals directly, to share the content that you feel is most important with them. And through email, you completely dictate when it gets delivered, who it gets delivered to, what you feature, and how often. So you really have true ownership. And then the last item on the email side of things is just that the concept that not only can you do that always, but it gives you an opportunity to really communicate in a timely basis. We saw lots of great examples through much of the pandemic where brands really spoke with empathy and communicated great updates as to what was happening while still focusing on sales and tying it into things like Labor Day or Memorial Day, July 4th, as we'll see coming up in the next few weeks. Now, why is email so big right now? Well, it's a channel that spans across all different age groups. It's highly penetrated, and it's what you'll see on the next slide is being highly, highly engaged with. What we found as we dug through the data is that email is having a huge impact right now. We have something that we call email attributed revenue at Klaviyo, and it's how we think about the revenue that comes in as a result of email specifically. What we've seen from the time frame before and during the pandemic is that it's increased by 75%, which is really tremendous. And there's a good reason why. On the next slide, what you'll see is that email open rates have gone up dramatically. They're up 22%. Compared to the previous time frame, and you can see a really great increase compared to 2019. And beyond that, people are clicking, they're actually engaging pretty heavily. So email clicks are up 45%, which is really tremendous. So people are out there, they're opening, they're engaging, they're consuming the content. And then on the next slide, the last one here, this is what we call revenue per recipient. So it's the actual dollar amount that you're making for every individual that you send to. And you can see that since that 3/15 date, when most people went into a stay-at-home timeframe, the revenue per recipient is up almost 50%. So really tremendous growth and a big opportunity for brands to be thinking about right now. And that's it for me. Lucas, I turn it over to you. I think you have some stats as well.
I do. So you did such a good job really highlighting the overall trends of e-commerce and sales in general. I really just wanted to take a slide to shout out all of the entrepreneurs doing customer support themselves, the customer support agents and teams, because just as we saw a big spike in sales, we also saw a big spike in customer service inquiries. But what we didn't necessarily see was the total number of active agents. So this is on the left-hand side. Taking a look at across all of Gorgeous' nearly 3,000 customers, the total number of tickets that were being asked. And here we can see that it actually goes up by about 50%, but the total number of agents hasn't really grown at that same rate. So if you're a support agent or an entrepreneur and you're answering about 100 tickets per day, which is the average, you're now having to answer 150. And this really has two impacts. One is it can have a tremendous impact positively or negatively for your customer lifetime value. If a customer has a bad experience, something doesn't get shipped because it gets lost on COVID or anything else, then they want a response back. And if they have that negative experience, they're probably not going to come back. However, if they have a great experience, every single customer support interaction is really that opportunity to engage with them in something else that's value add for your brand. So I want to go into the next few slides and really talk about some of the different ways that that brands can do this and engage with their customers in a way that's meaningful, both to have a better customer experience, but also to drive that lifetime value for the brands. So we're going to take a look at some of the best practices to build those relationships now, but as well moving forward. Like we chatted with at the start of the webinar, a lot of these trends of jumping towards e-commerce are continuing to happen. It's not just a one-time, okay, we have to go online, but once the stores open back up, we'll go back to a traditional brick and mortar retailer. Consumers are really shifting and accelerating that movement online. So the first thing is consumer needs have just changed. They may be buying a product for one reason, but it's being used in a totally different way. And if you've changed up your messaging, I'd love to hear some examples in the chat of anything that you've done that works for you. But for instance, really finding your new heroes. So before it was a lot of athletes. I mean, I think we all watched The Last Dance. It went from being like Mike in advertisements to supporting frontline workers and the heroes, and even just staying at home. So things like soaps that were just a grocery store purchase are now having a whole new life. Like Joe mentioned, as pots and pans and cookware goes up, the way that people are behaving is changing as well. So Brava has an ad there for really increasing the amount of time spent at home. Theragun, again, we talked about workout equipment. People aren't going to the gym anymore because they can't. And I mean, I can think of a long list of places I would rather go than a public gym right now. And finally, just self-care as well. With people who are able to work from home, we're seeing a lot of burnout because you're just not disconnecting. So self-care as well. So we're seeing a lot of that messaging start and change, and that's reflected all throughout that customer journey, from when they first hear about your brand to when they have that one-to-one interaction. So how does this change things? Well, we're calling it conversational commerce. So really how e-commerce merchants can increase their conversion rate and lifetime value through those one-to-one interactions. No surprise, as Joe said, that a lot of that is happening on mobile. So US mobile messaging app users is only going up and up and up. 61% of consumers message businesses regularly. And I think that as entrepreneurs in the e-commerce space, we see this directly, but also as consumers, we see this. If we're ordering some groceries for a curbside pickup, before we go and venture out, put on our mask and head out in public, it's not uncommon to say, hey, I want to double check to make sure that my order is ready. This is just one of the ways that consumer behavior is changing in a way that brands need to be able to adapt to. And 69%, so well over half, almost 3/4 of consumers said that being able to message a business helps them feel more confident. And this is particularly true in high ticket items. So I know that if you were at Klaviyo Boston last year, one of the loudest cheers of applause was when Eric Bandhold said he moved off of Amazon. And a big reason for that is that you can really own that customer messaging channel. And if you do sell a higher ticket item, say a suitcase, or if you're trying to buy a sofa right now amidst the pandemic, you want to know that you can do payment installments, that there's a return policy. Are they able to deliver it into your home, or do you need to have two strong friends that can help you lift it up the stairs. So it's a lot of different reasons why customers are messaging in. But taking a look at that data, a lot of it is to learn about the product or service, get support, and then also make a purchase. So traditionally, customer support has been thought of as something that's very reactive and happens post-sale and is really something that you want to do to just minimize your costs, and it's not really an investment. But looking at the numbers, just as many, if not more people are messaging support, which is really transforming into a sales team online to make a purchase. We actually had one customer, Decathlon, that had to close all their retail stores, and they moved their agents online. So if you were an expert in kayaks, you could help people make that kayak purchase because it's a great social distancing activity. So it really is an awesome success story of a brand that's been able to adapt to the new normal. Now, the most compelling stat that we've seen is a conversion rate for SMS or live chat throughout the website. So 28% of people who engage in a pre-sales chat, if they're responded to in less than 10 minutes, they end up converting. So a lot of times when people are asking about a product pre-purchase, even on the ads, saying things like, are you still delivering? Is this soap antibacterial? Does this massage gun work if I've just worked out at home? If you respond quickly, you're adding an extra quarter to your conversion rate. So how are some of the ways that we can do this? Well, one of the simplest ones is in post-purchase email upsells. And by upsell, it's not necessarily another product, but rather a value add here. So here we see in this GIF, someone's asking about their product post-purchase. We say, here you go, here's your shipping information. And by the way, you have this many loyalty points available. So it's encouraging that next purchase. What good is having a loyalty program if it's not increasing your lift in sales? But if you're like me, if I were to ask you, anyone in the panel or in the chat, how many air miles do you have right now? Most people don't really know unless that's really presented to them. It's a great way to increase that value there. And especially if you are doing anything else in terms of driving that brand value, that customer touch point is such an easy way to increase that lifetime value and that positive brand association. So it could be, thank you again for your purchase. Because you purchased a special collection, we were able to donate. You bought 5 masks, so we donated 5 masks to frontline workers. But you can't do this if you're seeing that big increase in demand. And so what's called the customer support death spiral is if it's taking too long to hear back from the brand. Let's say you email in, you respond to that email shipping notification, but you don't get a response. Well, what do? Maybe you chatted, maybe you respond to that SMS response that you got. You go on and you see their ads on Facebook and you comment, hey, I ordered before, where is my order? And that's just not a good look for a brand at any point. So by using some automation, you're able to really stay on top of those commonly asked questions where you can pull that data in. And one of the coolest examples I've seen of this as an automation is they sent the email out through Klaviyo and said, respond to this email with the code word, and that code word triggered an automation for a special discount or access to a private collection. And that way it's just really engaging with the people who engage with you. The next platform I want to talk about is Facebook Messenger. And if in the chat box, let us know if you are using Facebook Messenger in any of your ads or if you've used Facebook Messenger with a brand. And the reason that we bring it up is there are a lot more calls to action for, hey, send us a message. We see Facebook Rooms starting in, and there are a lot of cool messenger bots that you can use post-sale. So what happens is, we see a lot of messenger, especially in the Philippines. So what happens is people will say that they want to go to this collection. You can opt in, you can capture that email and send it to a Klaviyo workflow. But again, it's people being on a mobile first platform as they're browsing their Facebook feed on their couch. Maybe they're in Facebook Rooms talking to a loved one. The other reason that we bring up those changes in messages when it comes to marketing from a customer support standpoint is Facebook and Instagram comments. A lot of times people will mention either positive, say a fire emoji, I need this, when will you be having your 4th of July sale, asking all of these questions that have purchase intent, and all too often they're ignored, but you're really sitting on a gold mine. And by responding to those questions, it almost acts like free remarketing because they get that notification of, hey, Highlight has responded to you, or hey, Peloton has responded to you. So it reminds you to go back and keep finishing that purchase. Also, with a lot of things going on with shipping delays, maybe people are really over ordering, so you're backlogged and out of stock. A lot of times we will ask, hey, where's my order? These guys are a scam. They're not shipping anything out. So by proactively addressing those comments, it does help your brand's overall health and shows that you are a brand that cares, and you're not just driving a lot of different activities. And there's a great message here from Dave in the chat. Spend a lot of time and money on messenger lists and growth. Now it's completely wasted because Facebook doesn't allow us to communicate with them very easily, extremely restricted. It is now that it is pay to play. However, I don't know, Dave, if you have experimented with that at all, but I've heard that the conversion rates are quite good. And with Facebook Messenger in particular, it's a super easy way to capture emails with that email that's on Facebook. It auto fills it out, and then you can just zap it right over to Klaviyo. I've seen quite a few brands do that with great success. So it might be worth spending just a little bit more money to engage that audience, and then moving it over to an own channel, which hopefully is Klaviyo. Perfect. So how does that tie in with Gorgeous? Well, when it comes to the automation, like I mentioned, there's really sort of 3 types of comments that you want to respond to. One is a social lead, so somebody who's showing a purchase intent within that item. So for example, saying something like, oh, I'm flying within the country, I need masks, will they be delivered by the weekend? Or, hey, I'm building a home gym, do you still have any dumbbells over 8 pounds in stock, because they're totally sold out everywhere? It could also be a negative comment, which is just as important to respond to. And it could be social questions, just people asking about it. And if you pay attention to these are the kinds of questions that you want to add to your FAQ within your other marketing communications as well, because there's no better voice than the voice of your customer. Now, SMS and text messaging, and we'll be sending out a copy of these slides, or we can definitely kind of piece together the main ones. But what are some of the best practices when it comes to the text messaging as a brand? Well, obviously message personalization. So have the customer's name and who you're talking to. Don't just be a faceless drone saying, thank you for your order from our store, we're shipping here. You have that information. Hey, Joe, hey, John, hey, Mary. It goes a long way in really adding to that level of personalization and catch their attention. It's not the internet of the 1990s anymore. Why not add in a GIF or an emoji, add a little bit of color to really differentiate that? Now, don't go too crazy with it, but it's a great way to add some formatting and really say at a glance what that message is about. And use your copy from Instagram. It's almost like the post-purchase emails where you have nearly a 100% open rate, and it's just wasted real estate. It's just the most boring generic copy. Get creative with it, get fun. Look at your best performing emails and replicate some of those headings in your SMS. Ask the recipient a question, create that dialogue, and speak in the first person. It's weird to think of sending a text message in the third person to another person. So why would you do that differently as a brand? If it's that one-to-one interaction, talk to your customers human being to human being. They know someone's behind it. Open up that friendly face, and also just don't blast, don't ruin text message marketing. Segment it and just really handle the replies one-to-one. Now, we've talked about your ads. We've talked about which SMS service do you recommend using? Klaviyo. We're on the webinar with Klaviyo. It's a powerful tool. Joe or Mary, do you want to maybe talk about some of the success that some of your customers are seeing, or John, any success that you've had with SMS?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing pretty well for us right now. Like we're getting about 1,000 opt-ins a week, which is pretty good. And so we prioritize. We started out just doing a pop-up, then okay, that's killing it. Let's add it to our footer. Let's add it to our checkout page. Let's add it to account creation, and just eventually it became any place you can opt into email, you can opt into SMS. So we're pursuing it actively for sure.
Yeah, that's very much, very much in line with how many of our customers have started. They've started with a small test just to understand how it works. In some cases, we have customers that have used SMS before with a different platform and wanted to just kind of test it out and get their feet wet, and others who had never used it before. So it was all new learning for them. And just the way that John kind of walked through their process, that's very much what we're seeing. Many brands are having really great results. I would say anecdotally, the feedback I've heard, they're surprised how easy it is to actually do, which is really great. Like, I think it can have this perception that it's challenging, but it's a lot easier is like the general feedback. And that makes me smile because it means that specifically for Klaviyo, that it's really accessible to folks to get going on. So it's definitely worth checking out, in my opinion.
And especially because you can integrate SMS messages so easily into each flow. So you have dedicated campaigns you can send with Klaviyo, but also if you have like an abandoned cart flow, you can choose to send SMS message as opposed to an email. So it all works really simultaneously.
I was just gonna say it's up to about 6% of our monthly revenue, and it doesn't look like it's cannibalizing email, which was always kind of for me. That it's like, okay, yeah, text is a more expensive channel than email. Am I just getting the same sales as I would, but paying more for that software? But it seems like they're kind of mutually exclusive. Like people seem to go to either email or SMS, but not both. So, we're 3-4 months into like it being really a heavy part of our strategy, but it seems to be, kind of picking up steam. And if we're, 6% of sales by, Q4, then that's really exciting.
That's awesome to hear. And I think that anecdotally as well, I haven't really heard too much negative about SMS. Customers enjoy it. I think a lot of people are really hesitant to try it. And this is how I realize that I'm turning into an old person, is whenever I try something new, I compare it to starting something new when I was first launching. And before joining Gorgeous, I was a merchant myself. Before using Klaviyo in my own store, I'd used MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, and a few others. And it was so hard to set it up with the integration with Shopify. You're using third-party port tools and just everything else. It really is very easy to get started. Joe, I see you've unmuted yourself. Do you have anything else to add in on that note?
No, just ready to jump in. You took the words away from me. It was perfect.
Perfect. So we've talked about Facebook. We've talked about email and how you can automate some of that. We've shared some stats, but what about live chat on the homepage? Well, again, people are afraid to get going with live chat, and with good reason, because customer expectations are that if they ask a question, they'll get a response. I remember one time, I can't even remember what it was for, but the live chat popped up and then asked me for my phone number, and then I got cold called. If I'm chatting in, I want to talk as a consumer over chat. I don't want to be cold called. And preferably, I don't want to hear back in a couple of business days. So again, use some of those autoresponders for those commonly asked questions, but as a rule, start close to cash. So maybe I should reverse my slides, but I'll talk about this in a couple when we chat about the cart page. But don't just pop up and say, do you have any questions? Make it fun. So if you're a bike store, put in a funny little GIF of someone on a penny farthing bike, or in this case, we have a nice, cute little bulldog riding a bike. So, hey, welcome. Check out our newest models. If you have any questions, happy biking. I think for the longest time, entrepreneurs loved e-commerce because it was so turnkey and you can make money in your sleep, almost like a vending machine. But as a consumer, especially on a higher ticket item, if anyone cycles, it gets expensive fast. People have questions and they want that in-store experience, just like Decathlon did after moving their retail associates on site. So give them a welcome. If you're going to give them an offer, make it a little bit time-based so that they have incentive to complete that purchase now. ask them how they got here today. So again, for your marketing, but also just as someone walking into a store for a first time, hey, welcome to our store. How did you hear about us? But also something really cool is if you are doing any charitable causes. So we have a lot of customers who in November will reinforce the fact that they are doing something for breast cancer research and awareness. Or now, if you are donating any of your proceeds to frontline workers or any of your products, mention that in the chat. Hey, welcome to our store. We're donating a mask for every $10 spent in the store to frontline workers. Thanks much and happy shopping. On a collection and product page, this is where you want to get a little bit more specific with the targeting. So if you joined the mega stream ahead of time, you'll notice we were talking about these lovely Klaviyo Highlight backpacks, and you can say, hey, do you have any questions about our backpacks? You can travel for a week comfortably with one of them. So things like that, those objection busting statements of your products. What's the main purpose of the purchase? Highlight a positive review. And again, any specific discounts. So in this case, we have Richard popping up in the chat. Hey, those shoes are made with 100% cruelty-free faux leather, and our customers love them. Usually women go half a size up, so you're reducing your cost of an exchange or an unhappy customer down the road. And then make it personal. Say, hey, I'm your fashion consultant. If you have any questions here, just let us know. And this is where being mobile first is very powerful, especially if you're SMSing with a customer. You can say things, and Beardbrand does a great job of this with SMS post-purchase. Say, hey, send us a picture of your wardrobe, what you're going to be wearing with these shoes, and we'll recommend a pair of shoes for that outfit. And finally, on the cart page, reinforce trust for their purchase. So, hey, great choice. Do you have any other questions about it? Have a final upsell closure question. Do you need anything else to go with your purchase? And then finally, a delayed final offer, just to help them complete that checkout. And what that delayed offer does is, maybe they start searching for discount codes. Everyone gets a discount code for joining the email list, but what if you can't find that email? You can't find anything. People are digging in their email. Just give them the 10% off code that they're looking for. If you're comfortable giving a 10% off code for joining the email list, just give it to them at the cart page. Say, hey, by the way, we often email out discount codes. If you can't find one, here's one right here for you. So help them complete that purchase, especially when people see that they know that discounts are an option. It just makes them feel better about the purchase. And again, it does go into some, I was on such a roll and then I lost my train of thought there, but it does go into some of that personalization of being able to really help them with their sale. So what does all of this mean? How is this an unfair advantage? Well, let's take a look at one store and what they did back in December. And the reason that we chose these numbers are that the Black Friday holiday numbers are just about what we're seeing now during COVID. So we had one merchant who was able to drive 500 additional queries. They converted 230 of them, so almost 50%, and did an extra $22,000 in sales from support. So we looked at the conversion percentage of chat, the discounts used in social, the conversion per agent, and taking a look at that first time response. So quite a few different metrics here that we can see all impacting sales. And it's amazing what you can do if you just help your customers answer their question, which is, how do I buy? Now, I did see we have a couple of questions here in the chat. So Jorge, what's your favorite chatbot service? Tidio? Absolutely not. Go with Gorgeous. I'm going to give a very biased response because, hey, we sponsored the webinar and Gorgeous pays my bills, but I truly believe as a merchant myself that Gorgeous is the best way to get everything into one place. Kodiak here says, would the customer be able to text the same number as the call-in number to be able to reach the same customer service team? That's a very technical question that I'm going to have to look into. Sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's an SMS short code. Sometimes it'll just be different platforms doing it. Is it possible? Yes, but it would require a lot of out of the box thinking. The really small answer is for a lot of businesses using a private number, they can do that, but that's not really what we're here to look into. So let me look into that one and definitely follow up with me post webinar. Perfect. So I think we are moving over to John now, talking about some engagements that have driven sales for you.
Awesome. Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, we kind of gave a rundown on what High Lead is earlier, so won't bore everybody with that, but just some of the cool, little customer journey things that we're doing. I'm gonna take you through those. Just because it's here on the homepage, I can let you know, one of the cool things we've done is we've actually turned 5,000 of our customers into investors through Reg A crowdfunding, and that's been a really awesome way to kind of make sure your customers are sticky if they actually own equity in the brand. So kind of a cool thing we've done that's pretty unique. So check that out for sure. And then we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah. Hey, John, I have a question for you on that. So most crowdfunding is really pre-sales and not necessarily giving up equity. Did you give up equity in Highlight to the customers who backed with this?
Yeah, so instead of like a Indiegogo or Kickstarter where you're backing a product, the Regulation A is part of the Jobs Act that Obama passed, and we use a platform called Start Engine. We'll give them a shout out to actually have people purchase equity in the brand, and then you can decide what's right for you. We actually put them in their own customer group. They get exclusive perks for being an investor. And we handle them. It's a completely different segment that we handle in every single email we send. Should the investors get this? Should they not? Do they qualify for this discount? Do we need to talk to them differently? So yeah, that's something completely unique to us.
Wow, that's really cool. I had no idea that you guys did that.
Yeah, I just mentioned it because it's on that homepage image that got clipped.
Cool.
Let's
get into social advertising.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I mentioned to Joe when we were prepping for this. I mean, we're seeing our lowest CPA since like 2015. We have entire, cruise lines, airlines not advertising right now, political stuff not going on, sports not going on. So, I mean, you really have these extra impressions that are up for grabs, and we've been, getting an incredible return on our spend and trying to pump every dollar we can into it while the good times last. So, I'll go into kind of what we do with those people once we get them. But yeah, our paid social, we were actually looking at turning it off not too long ago. It was getting so expensive, and now here we are back in, the good old days of, huge returns on that Facebook spend. So we can go to the next slide there.
That's awesome. And just one thing that I wanted to chime in with for the people paying attention at home, I believe it was spring 2016, which is when Facebook really hit maximum inventory. So it's almost at that pre-max inventory levels, which was when the ad costs really shot up.
Yeah. So, it's really important to know where your email addresses are coming from. No news there. We've done a lot of kind of heavy lifting on the development side, and with our, we use a different SaaS tool for pop-ups and SMS and ESP and all this stuff. So connecting all those dots, we put a lot of work in there, but it's really important to know exactly where your captured emails are coming from so that you can talk to them specifically and give some personalization to different branches of your welcome series. So we can jump to the next slide there. This is, you can see back in December, I mean, this is if you have Klaviyo and you go to your master newsletter list and you click on your list growth report. If you're not looking at that regularly, you should be. But for Klaviyo, where you see API in December there, 81%. API for Klaviyo is effectively when you see direct in GA and Google Analytics, it means they don't know. So you need to kind of unpack where all of those unknown email addresses are coming from. So you can see in December, we didn't know where 81% of our email addresses were coming from. Account creation, on-site pop-up, checkout, footer, header, wherever. Not to say that we weren't getting email addresses from pop-ups, but we didn't know to attribute them to pop-ups. So you can see in May, we're actually getting a little bit clearer on where these pop-ups are firing from, whose emails we're capturing, and our list growth has actually doubled. So it's not reflected here in the percentages, but as we've gotten into Q2, our email growth has doubled. So I can jump to the next slide there. So these are just more, examples of where we're capturing emails: header, footer, on-site pop-up, loyalty program, refer a friend program. Where are you capturing those emails, and then what do you send to them once you capture the email? So that's, I think, what we're getting into next. We go to the next slide. Oh no, so one other thing to keep an eye out for. I know probably most people, sorry, we can go to the next slide there. I'll touch on the, so I mean, I'm sure almost everyone here is running a blog. The goal of that, other than added value to your existing database, is hopefully one day to get ranked high enough on Google to drive organic traffic. So it's super important to recognize when you do start ranking on Google, when you do start getting organic traffic. So we've got, someone we partnered with who does a lot of great content on intermittent fasting. You can see what this year, 30,000 people have been to the site from that, organic clicking on the Google ad. So if we go to the next page, this is this awesome guy, Thomas DeLauer. He's given us his content. You're going to have a pop-up that fires exclusively on blog pages that, speaks directly to the content, opposed to a % off, because if people are Googling, hey, intermittent fasting, tell me about it, and they click and they land on HighLeap's site, they probably don't even know HighLeap makes apparel. They need to be talked to differently than someone who Google's, performance shorts and hits your homepage. So, the email capture should speak to that. And then, of course, the welcome series should reflect that as well. So we can go to the next slide there.
Now, I have a question for you on that, John, if you wanted to elaborate a little bit. How does the welcome series differ from somebody who's searching for performance shorts or a branded search term versus intermittent fasting? And then you're nurturing them into wanting some of your shorts. How would that welcome sequence differentiate?
We are 2 slides away, brother. We're getting there. We'll just jump to the next one then. So you can see here, we talked about, like, if we want to, no, let's not actually do it, but if we jumped all the way back and we looked at all the different entry points we identified to a list, we're using those to branch our welcome series. So you can see we have 6 different flows based on where you enter. Depends on which branch you get. So you can see kind of tucked back on the right, our normal welcome series, you signed up in the footer, we promised you 20% off, here it is, versus something kind of tucked back on the right. Welcome to our community. Here's a little bit about our blog. Here's more content you might also like. Oh, by the way, here's, your welcome offer. So it's still in there. We're still driving sales, but the hero content, the secondary, is much more about the, blog and continuing to get them engaged. Just some other, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. And we have another question from the audience. Do you use paid promotion to promote content pages like a blog post, or do you only drive traffic to the blog organically? So are you layering on some paid on top of that organic reach as well?
It's only product based. The quality of the leads is, just not, you're not, especially right now, when we're killing it on our paid social and prospecting, like we're barely spending any money remarketing to our existing database. It's everything being pumped into prospecting on paid social. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something you could look at, but right now, I wouldn't recommend it. Can we go back just for one more second?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I was just a couple other little wrinkles, if you sign up in the footer, you're not given a promo code on site. You actually have to go to your email to get it. So we actually have Klaviyo make that promo code. Whereas an on-site pop-up, you enter your email, you're given that code, and we want to give you the same code in your email address for consistency, and so we don't give out multiple first-time purchase codes. So those are two different branches. One might be you created an account. We don't make any mention of a discount when you create your account, but you're still added to the list. So we actually want to delay your welcome series for a day to see if you'll purchase on your own. We have a completely different pop-up for organic email capture versus paid email capture. And one of the big things, like right now, especially when we're killing it with our CPA, we do not want to change an ad at all. You change a link, you change creative, you change the audience, you may never get that low CPA back because the ad goes back into learning mode. So by separating our paid and organic traffic, we can actually change our on-site experience for all our organic customers and take down and put up new discounts and all that stuff. Gives us that ability to be nimble as a direct-to-consumer brand, but it lets us keep a consistent offer for our paid traffic, which keeps our CPA down. So that's, even though right now they're getting the exact same offer, drop of a hat, we can say, okay, organic, we're doing something different. Paid, we don't have to change. We can keep that awesome CPA. So just kind of all the reasons for all those different welcome series, even though a lot of the creative's the same, the kind of thought behind it is a little bit different.
John, one quick question on that. We had talked about this before, but what prompted you and the Highlight team to break out the paid welcome series versus the other welcome flows when you first did it? Like, what was the pinnacle, the precipice for it?
It was that we are very nimble, and you can put a positive spin on it. You'd say nimble, but negative spin, you'd say reactive. And we want to, change something on site. We think we have the next great idea. We're going to do it. And it kept messing up our paid social, and it kept sending our ads back into learning mode because we had to spin up a new discount, redirect to a new landing page, all that stuff. So now we actually pass a custom UTM parameter on every paid ad that says, prospecting or retargeting or whatever it is. And we target that, and we only show a pop-up for paid prospecting to people that have that UTM parameter, and everyone else gets the organic pop-up. So that's how we segmented that traffic.
Very cool. We get frequent questions about that, so it's a really great example, in my opinion. Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, totally. We can jump to the next slide there, or maybe even. Oh yeah. So once you have them in that welcome series, you've got the email, they've been through the welcome series, now they're your customer, right? So how do you talk to them about your products? How do you maintain that one-to-one relationship? We can jump to the next slide there. I think this is all just a big way we do this is through our abandoned browser workflow. And, it's really tiny. It looks like a line graph there, but every little dot is its own branch of the abandoned cart flow. So every single hero product we have is its own separate email. If you build, let's actually jump to the next slide there. If you build the abandoned browser flow, out of the box, it's going to look something like what's on the left. Pull in generic hero image, pull in merge var, name of the product, and a link to whatever that PDP is. In my opinion, a smarter way to do it is to identify, you don't have to have 30 unique emails like we do. Pick your top 5 products take the same, you probably spent a lot of time and energy making a great email announcing that product as new. You made some gifts, you put some extra effort in, attribute call outs that you wouldn't be able to pull in dynamically, and just send that email, but take the announcement of the new out of it. So it becomes like you see that huge kind of line graph of a flow that, here's 30 emails. Oh, that's a shitload of work. I don't have time to do all that. I probably already did it in announcing products as new, and just repurpose that template in the flow.
And you're so close to cash as well, where a customer has been on the website, they've added to their cart, you have their email, and you have that content already. That's just so much better than, hey, come back and complete your purchase.
Right. And we've got at the very tail end of that, waterfall of flows, we do have the generic, catch-all for, different t-shirts that come on and off the site, or products that don't have a great, here's attributes and gifts and all that stuff. But, for your hero products, like that abandoned browser should for sure be more than just a silhouette and a product name.
Absolutely. Next slide.
Do it. Maybe even one more there. And then, these are just some cool numbers. This factors in retail of sort of industry standard for repeat purchases and apparel, highly with its one-to-one, management of that customer journey. We're, 2x industry average in a much shorter time frame, in kind of the next 3 months or quarter versus lifetime. And some of the ways we do that are through surveys and quizzes. So we can jump to the next slide there. Anytime someone makes their first purchase, we send them down our first purchase survey, and we do % off for someone's first order, because that seems to convert a little bit better. But for surveys, we find that dollars off convert better, because someone feels like they're actually earning something tangible, like a dollar off versus a %. And people will tell you, a lot of really cool information. So for us, when it comes to like knowing who our investors are, any of that personal information, you take it in this quiz, you own it, that data, but you can also turn it back around and leverage it when you're speaking to the customer. So someone tells us in their first purchase survey, oh, I love kettlebell training. In the flow where you deliver that $20 code after their survey, you say shorts recommended for kettlebell training. Even if it's the exact same email as someone else is getting, you're pulling in this variable, this new custom property you've set, and it's a personalized email that, all of our shorts are great for kettlebell training, but it speaks to that kind of one-to-one. We can jump to the next slide there. And then, so we have that like survey, that first purchase survey, where we capture, customer data, more demographic sort of stuff and personal interests. We also have our perfect short quiz, where people tell us what they want from a product side. So you can see, we passed a custom event through the API into Klaviyo, where we get all the answers to what someone did for their quiz. And now we know their gender, now we know their favorite color. Next time we launch an olive short, we're going to hit up this guy and be like, we know you love olive, you told us, check out the new olive short. So, your mind can go wild with your brand and, whatever questions you would ask and data you'd leverage, but people will take these quizzes and surveys and give you this information. And once they take it, turn it back around and use it in the customer journey.
What tool do you use for capturing that information?
If it's demographic stuff, we use Wufoo or Typeform. And then there's a really cool company called Cartful that does our product-based quiz.
Really cool.
I think that might be it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Awesome. Thank you so much, John, for giving us a little peek behind your marketing machine. And I know that myself as a merchant, what you're doing is just so far heads and shoulders above what I did. So that was just so insightful, I think, for everyone here. Yeah, so the name of that tool was called Cartful, and make sure you say that John Palmer from Highlight sent you so that John gets some free stuff.
When I come to negotiating with them, next when our contract's up, I want to make sure they know.
That's right. So make sure it was John, not Lucas from Gorgeous, because they say, Lucas, you're sending us so many leads. I'm like, no, it's all John. So make sure that they know it's from John.
That was great, John. Thank you. So we had one final question though for you before we could let you off the hook. What is one piece of advice that you have for your fellow marketers?
That wasn't enough.
That was a lot of piece of advice. Touche.
No, I mean, use, I would say, like, use flows to trigger flows. Like in your welcome series, have a data feed of products that trigger the abandoned browser flow. Like in a perfect world, you're not sending anyone campaigns for 2 months. Like every flow should trigger a flow. And then it's like a conversation. The customer's taking an action that determines their next, email, instead of getting hit up about something random that you have a less chance of it being relevant to them.
I think that's awesome. Thank you.
And we had one question. I'm assuming it's for you, John, but again, from Matthew, who is your ideal type of customer?
I mean, we started out with our roots in CrossFit back in 2012. And so that was where we kind of did our quality and it really had to hold up to whatever you threw at it. But at this point, I mean, we've really grown to, anyone who's interested in fitness and living a fitness lifestyle. But I mean, we do skew, a little bit older, maybe, 30 to 45 instead of the 25 to 35.
Awesome.
All right, so at this point, we're going to begin our moderated discussions. Once again, it's my pleasure to introduce today's special moderator and Chief Commerce Officer at Something Digital, Philip Jackson. Philip, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And John, wow, like basically a masterclass in every single thing that you could possibly be thinking about. I think you just set the roadmap for the next 3 years for every client at Something Digital. I wish I were being sarcastic, but that was fantastic. Like that was amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you very much.
Taking notes furiously. I'm curious, I just have to ask you, John, I know we'll jump deep into it here in a minute. But from your perspective as an operator, does hiring in your organization, like now compared to early on, you fulfill on your vision, or are you looking for people to come bring, additional playbook and their vision and their value into the organization? That's something I think a lot of operators are probably thinking about today, is like how much of that is executing on your playbook and how much of that is like trying to fill where there might be a gap in your existing playbook.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on the know what you don't know philosophy. Like I'm pretty savvy when it comes to like technically connecting APIs and all that sort of stuff. And I help lead that strategy. But I admittedly, like I'm not the most creative at copywriting or imagery or template design or some of that stuff. So we got some really awesome people in-house that help fulfill that vision. But I mean, and that's the other great thing about whether it's Klaviyo or any other SaaS tool, is the ability to A/B test. So if anyone comes to me like, hey, our abandoned cart flows, got a 60% open rate, I think I can get it to 65. Let me tweak this template. Great, let's A/B test it. Like it's if you're not evolving, you're not growing, like you're just stagnant. So yeah, anyone at Highlight is always welcome to test things.
Yeah, that's just brilliant. Well, thank you all for kind of opening it up here. I want to prompt folks, if you are in the live chat right now, you have the ability to use the Q&A box below. That's a great way for you to be able to ask your questions. We'll make sure that we'll get to all of them, provided that we have the time. Just as a brief way of introduction, my name is Philip Jackson, and I work at a company called Something Digital. We have cool t-shirts, but we run e-commerce stores for brands just like Highlight and other direct-to-consumer brands of the nature in the consumer goods categories that I think are more durable right now. If you've been paying attention to Klaviyo's content, you'll know that new essentials seem to be pretty durable, and folks like you that are brand operators that are looking for strategic growth advice come to companies like ours as a full service agency to help you with everything from creative to paid search, creating a growth and roadmap strategy for you and your brand. But we would be remiss to say that we have like one playbook does not fit them all. And I think the beginnings of knowledge for us in understanding how to help a brand, I know it's been said a lot, just throw out the playbook, but yeah, I think the right thing is to develop your own growth model and your own growth strategy like Highlight has done. So I'm curious, if I were to ask the folks on the panel here, and maybe starting with you, John, how important is brand voice, and what did you do to sort of create that as an organization? And is that something that becomes collaborative? You mentioned A/B testing. I'm curious if A/B tests like prove out what resonates with a customer and how you fold that back into future value in like expressing what your brand voice is.
Yeah, I think I was at IRCE last.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, he was at IRCE last year.
And he received one piece of advice that will shock you. Marketers hate this one piece of controversial advice.
Yeah, if you take nothing else away, it's this, and then it's a cliffhanger.
It's that John went to IRCE last year. While we wait for John to get reconnected there was a great question that was for him, but Philip, I think given how many brands you work with, I think it would be a great question for you to answer as well. But how do you speak to one audience directly without excluding any other audiences? So the question is about John starting out with CrossFit, but then shifting to other audiences.
Yeah. So if I had to, I could answer this question in 4 hours, but I'll do it in 20 seconds. The modern approach is what we're seeing and what brands have actually educated us into doing and helping execute across all of our clients is that there is no like one best fit average experience for that is good for everybody on your website. So the era of the PDP, sort of like, not that I'm saying the PDP is dead, but the PDP is an average of what works for most people, but it doesn't mean that it's specialized or purpose built for any one audience. And that's where I think you have a very clear opportunity with landing page campaigns to become extremely specialized by the audience that you're in front of, because nobody's going to find the landing page unless you've driven them to it. And so whether that's coming from, an email segment that's specialized speaking to a certain, let's say CrossFit is the example here, Highlight can become an extremely vocal CrossFit brand to just the CrossFit audience by utilizing landing page campaigns and having UGC that's focused on that vertical alone. And then to people that are less serious about fitness and they want something that's a little more, a little less serious and a little less intense, they can certainly soften that, elsewhere. I think also having, as your brand, as brands that we've managed, at least in the health and beauty category, have trended more towards being unisex or gender neutral brands, which seems to be a great approach for modern brand building. You still need to tell the very specific story to the male or female audience that would help with a particular, category, particularly in shaving. Shaving for men and women are very different, and they take place in different parts of the bodies. You want to tell that story. So I think landing pages are the right approach to being more specific with a particular audience. But that's what we're seeing brands do nowadays. in telling that content marketing sort of story. John, we lost you there mid-thought about IRCE. I'm curious, just getting back to the question so we all remember it. How do you develop the brand voice, and is there a feedback loop that you get back from learning what resonates with customers and say like an A/B test?
Yeah, sorry about that. Dangers of working from home. The round
No problem.
we've all been there in the last 2 months. So yeah, they had this formula at one of the keynote addresses on how to find your brand voice, and it was taking the attribute shared of your first 5 employees, and it was both a guide to like hiring and to building your brand voice. So things like authenticity or trustworthiness or passion and kind of develop. So that was where we started, and then from there you got to see what works for your customers and how far is too far when because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. You want to be approachable, and that's something that we've been challenged with internally. Is we started off in this very niche hardcore workout market. How do we branch out into those concentric circles and while remaining kind of authentic to our base? But yeah, testing is the only answer there.
I'm curious, just as a quick follow-up, and this could be a jump ball for the rest of the panel. When do you think that it's possible to have a voice that differs based on the audience? Can you be a little more edgy with the CrossFit audience versus, those that are like less serious athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to be smart enough with your data to be able to segment those people. But if your list is big enough and it's worth doing that work, like, if you have a segment of 5 people, it's not worth writing different copy. But if you've got 40% of your, you have to find that threshold of like where it's worth doing the work and what the returns on are for making that customization. But if you can carve up your audience into like 3 major cohorts, and it's like we've got 25,000 military and first responder folks that get a discount from us. We talk to them specifically. Our investors, we talk to them differently. 25,000 trainers, we talk to them differently, end consumers. And that's all just based on like customer groups and discounting. So yeah, for sure. But it's got to be a big enough cohort to warrant the work.
How does that carry through, Lucas, into customer experience? Is there a way? How do you keep that brand voice consistent for an audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the best example that I heard about this was actually at Dreamforce a couple of years ago with Sid, the head of e-commerce for Under Armour, which has a ton of different customer segments. The Under Armour hunting group is totally different than the people who just buy Under Armour at TJ Maxx to go to the gym. So for him, Sid was saying that experience needs to be totally seamless across the board. Where if you get a marketing email from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for that line of stuff because you love The Rock, then every experience should feel like that, like The Rock himself is answering your customer support ticket. In the way that it's funny, but flip it on.
No, I love that. That's all I've ever wanted.
Just imagine The Rock answering a support ticket. Hi, Under Armour, I'd like to know about your return policy. It doesn't matter what our return policy is. But as a customer who loves The Rock, you would love that. But you flip it on its head, and at the same time, if you hate wrestling, you hate Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, you don't want to see those marketing emails. That tone in your support should be different. And a company that does it at a smaller scale really well is Beard Brand. So again, another Klaviyo customer, but Eric from Beard Brand says that he has the brand guidelines of this is how we should sound. And we want to sound like Beard Brand at all times, whether it's in a marketing email, a post follow-up question, or if somebody has a question. And maybe your brand tone of voice, and I tweeted it out this morning, I'm wearing some chubby shorts. They have a really cool thing that says, if you remove this tag, we're going to take it like you've worn the shorts and you can't return them anymore. And if you use really casual language in your marketing copy or even on your actual product copy, don't be all formal and stuffy when it comes to support. Don't say, Well, according to our return and exchange policy, you have up to 90 days to return your shorts pending no usage. And you can be a lot more casual, but say the same thing. Well, did you remove the tag? Then you can't return them. I'm sorry, but like we made it pretty clear before you rip the tag off. So have that same brand voice across the board, and it can be casual, formal, the type of slang you use, even the emojis that you use, but give people those guidelines to sound like the brand while being true to themselves.
I think Lucas makes a really good point here, Joe, in that there are brands like Chubby's that are top of mind when developing brand voice. And I think it's pretty cohesive throughout like every touch point in the Chubby's customer, journey. Can you think of other brands, to put you on the spot here, other brands that have found that voice and do that pretty well?
Yeah, it's actually hard to pick just one. What I love that you were just saying about how it's just a matter of consistency from the top down, all the way from like your first subject line, your first SMS message, all the way through to your return policy. Some that come to mind immediately that we've been looking at so far, I've actually, in many of the conversations, John, you'd be thrilled, I've talked about Highlight a lot recently, but I can't use that one because you just talked quite a bit about them. One of the ones that I've particularly loved seeing more recently, there's a brand called Uni. They're a pizza maker. They're like a backyard at home oven. They have like gas powered and fire powered ones. They just have a really great, like, it's casual, but it's not as casual as say Chubby's. And it comes through in all of the different marketing materials I've received. I've been doing a lot of research on them because I'm eager to purchase one. So I'm seeing their retargeting ads. I'm seeing the emails that they've sent. I've gotten a browse abandonment. And it's really consistent. And it's really not just consistent in message, but also in like a visual representation of not just the product, but what you can also do as a result of the product. So they have some great shots of just people being entertained in yards and kind of consuming the end product, which I've particularly liked. Some of the other ones that I've really gravitated towards, Huckberry does a really great job of, again, being casual, but not as playful, I guess, as I would categorize Chubby's as. But Huckberry is just very aware of who they are and who they're communicating to. And when you actually read it, it just makes perfect sense. Like, it's a masculine focused brand predominantly in my eyes. And all of the brands are really, all of the products they sell are really catered to kind of like a casual lifestyle outside in the kind of just not wilderness, but just casual lifestyle outdoors. And it just resonates really well. And it's a clear understanding of who they are. That's what I think works the best personally, is when you understand who you are and how you're perceived.
I think there's an interesting tie-in here too to sort of brand strategy and a couple of the brands you mentioned. I'm familiar with Uni myself, in that I from a couple of different methods. The first was J. Kenji Lopez Alt, who wrote a book called The Food Lab and has done a lot of work. He has a YouTube channel I've been watching throughout the entirety of the quarantine. And he's a big fan of Uni as like a pizza oven brand. He talks about them all the time, does a lot of videos with it. But they, I think, got their start on the Grommet, which is a sort of crowdfunding maker-centric marketplace that helps founders launch single product brands and then help them like learn how to do wholesale and scale into different categories. I feel like that sort of crowd-centric, crowdsourced brand is more native to having a more distinct voice because they're closer to their customers from day one. And I have that built-in feedback loop on day one. I'm interested if anyone here has a similar story. I know, John, your funding model lends to that pretty well. Lucas, any thoughts on?
Yeah, a really quick hack that you can do really anywhere, but it's easy with Gorgeous. Just do a shameless plug. But when you export all of your tickets, and you can even go through and see the comments or what people are saying in the reviews as well, but export that into a word cloud and see what kind of language people are using to describe it. And so that alone will have an impact on it. So looking at the Uni, for example, which I didn't know pizza ovens could be so affordable. Dangers of working in e-commerce, but are customers talking about the quality of the build? It feels really sturdy. It feels restaurant quality. It's industrial grade. or are they talking about the experience? I love a backyard barbecue with my family, great for date night. So how are people talking about the product or how they use it? And then you can kind of foster that. So if they are talking about using the Uni for a date night, publish some content around that and say, and even give that sub audience a name, so you could have the great date nights with Uni or anything like that. That does make that product more sticky.
Yeah, I think what has resonated really well for me, and this happens with most brands that I encounter that are doing it, and John, you guys at Highly do this really well, is leveraging and using other content in your marketing. So like you're producing content, you've got a community that's been built around it and that are actively consuming it. But a lot of times brands, I think, get stuck, especially when it comes to email and like product. And sometimes people aren't ready to purchase, but they still want to engage with you. Like I'm currently waiting for an Uni to be available for purchase. They're out, but I'm continuing every day to think about how my diet's going to go out the window once I'm able to actually make the pizzas. Like, so I'm engaging with the content regularly. I've watched tons of YouTube videos and they just do it really well. Another brand, Philip, just to piggyback off that one, that I think most people will be familiar with is Noon Hydration. So they offer like hydration tablets for runners and for people who are out there being athletic and getting things done. And what they do is a lot of their great success that they see from an email standpoint, some of their best sales actually come from their newsletters, where they're telling stories about people's training regimens, about what people are doing and how they're getting out there and being active. And it's really interesting because there's nothing about the product whatsoever in those newsletters, and they end up being ultimately some of their best revenue drivers. And again, all consistent with their brand voice, tone, imagery.
I'm curious how, let this again to the panel. I'm happy to hear from all of your experience and where you sit in the ecosystem, but how do you bring that feeling that we just talked about into email specifically? We've said for many years at Something Digital, like it or not, right? There's two like dirty secrets in e-commerce that move the needle. One is make your site faster, and two is send a little more email. And if you can do those two things, that might connect with your customers, but they're not like foolproof strategies that work without having some meaning behind it. And you just don't, you can't just shoot from the hip. I'm curious how you bring the brand into email and potentially other channels that, maybe it's not something that was born in email, but it's something that could live in email and sit really well with a customer. Nobody. Okay, let's rephrase it.
I thought I was waiting for Joe. I didn't want to be the karaoke microphone hog. Joe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can definitely go first. One thing that I think works really well is remembering. So many brands out there have had email going on for a while. They have flows that are going out there or automations that are live. But believe it or not, your voice and tone, it changes over time. The way you think about things, even as if you have brand standards, depending who's writing the emails, it kind of shifts a little bit. So for consistency purposes, we always recommend to do a quarterly audit to go through and look at like what you actually have going out. Are you still talking about things the way that you used to? Or do you need to change a little bit? What I see that works particularly well, for those listening, I came from the merchant side myself. So like I've been the e-commerce manager before. We had a list of terms that were like, if you're going to say this, like always use this vocabulary so it's always consistent. And these were the terms to avoid. So like we would never say the word experience. There's always better ways to say experience than actually talking about the experience. It's kind of a weird one, but that's one that's always stuck with me. And I think that really helps, especially as you're onboarding new people, to your earlier question, Philip, and getting them to understand exactly how your brand and voice should come through in emails, to like really have some of these guides, have a brand Bible that explains some of this. And when you think for me, when it seems like it's almost like you're talking to a child, like it's way too clear, that's probably when you're doing it right. But that's my perspective. Lucas, I toss it over to you.
Yeah, I could go on for hours about this. but piggybacking off of what you said, Joe, good copy. I think, thank you to everyone who's come here and joined us today. I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm glad that you're here, but I'm not excited. Everyone promoting webinar is saying I'm excited for this. I'm glad to do this, but ultimately I would be excited to go on a vacation right now, or I would be excited for a vaccine or to find $200 on the street. And what it comes down to is good copy. Basically everything that you're doing is asking someone to go somewhere and do something. So looking at the Uni, for example, you want people who have not purchased to go to the website and make a purchase. You have had people who purchase it. You want them to go to their Uni, use it, and hopefully invite a bunch of other people over so that they need one too. So it's not just, hey, here's a pizza recipe. It's, with restaurants closed right now, here's a way to deliver a taste of Tuscan to your 6 closest friends. Enjoy this recipe. And it's, you really want, people talk about telling stories in marketing all the time. Tell the stories about what you want people to do. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched the History Channel and seen Forged in Fire, where they start talking about 1600s Japanese samurai swords. I didn't know that I needed one until they start talking about that and telling that history. So tell the stories of the products that you want to buy, and every good story needs a moral, and the moral of that story is to buy that product. So the long version is just have good copy.
I think it's so interesting. It's easier said than done. Sometimes I write an essay every week for Future Commerce, which is a podcast that I run, and I find it very easy to crank out 2,500 words. I do it every week. I find it extremely and excruciatingly difficult to crank out 25 words.
well, what's that saying? I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time.
But I didn't have the time, right? And I think it's very difficult, and it is definitely an art as a brand to develop the expertise of being able to deliver the voice and tone in short form. I think that's just
and especially to say the same thing 25 different ways that's still engaging and captivating.
Yeah. John, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just one, like, it is really tough to come up with that. I admitted freely earlier, I'm not the most, I'm not the guy who's writing that 2,500, word essay. But, I think a lot of the times what we make the mistake of is that every person is consuming every email, and they're not, if you're killing it with a 30% open rate for your campaigns, like, if you've got something that's working in one place, like, put it somewhere else and amplify it. Like you did all that work to make that good copy. Like, we got a killer image from 2016 that product's still in the line. Like, if we're kidding ourselves if we think anyone we've acquired in the last 5 years has seen that. Like, don't be afraid to reuse the stuff that's working, and even exclude have engaged with it. But if you find something that works, take it and amplify it other places. You don't have to come up with new stuff all the time either.
And I think it's one last closing thought. I think it's important to be really honest with yourself that who cares less about what you're trying to do than you do, which is everyone. You might be really excited about something, but most people don't necessarily know. And again, using the Uni, the fact that it can now go up to 625 degrees Fahrenheit versus 600, what does that really mean? So make it tangible for people to understand. Don't just data dump it at them and assume that they know.
It's 25 better, Lucas. That's what I know. There's an interesting tie-in here to something I think about often. I heard a podcast with Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell, who do a tremendous podcast together called Off the Record. And there's this difference between the art and the trade. And as an artist, a musician might write 35 songs and 10 of them will make it to an album, and 25 of them wind up on some cutting room floor. It's like, we only really use the best of the best, and that's what art is, right? But as a trade, as a writer, Malcolm Gladwell says literally every word that he writes gets put somewhere. It's used and it's put to use somewhere. And I think that brand marketers sit somewhere between the art and the trade. in that we are trying to create art, but in creating art, you have to do a lot of trade. And you test a lot of copy, you test a lot of ad creative, you test a lot of email, and maybe it all gets used, but very little of it finally actually resonates. And when you find what resonates, you lean into it, right? It's been a long time since I was on the brand side, so I'd love some validation on that as a hypothesis. Okay, I see nods. I'll go with it. We do have a Q&A. I feel like this is super interesting. There was a question from an attendee that asks, what is Highlight's criteria for running a sunset flow? I.e., when do email subscribers get removed from the list? I'm super eager to hear this answer too. Do you ever remove dormant or stagnant customers? Do people cycle out?
So, John, I'd love to hear your perspective from how you guys address things at Highlight. It's definitely a best practice that we recommend that all brands focus on. It's important to make sure that you're ultimately cleaning your list. And when we think about it, those who are doing nothing, they're not opening, they're not engaging, they're not clicking. Ultimately, they can do harm in the long run. They just kind of bog you down. So for us, we're all about making sure that you're really being thoughtful. But John, do you guys, I should have looked earlier, but do you have a sunset flow? Are you removing subscribers at some point on the Highlight side?
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. So there's a couple, I mean, wouldn't be giving the talks if I wasn't pulling in like other channels or SaaS tools. So yeah, we have our daily, weekly, and monthly cadences. You know, to give Klaviyo a shout out, our Yadi, our rep is awesome about helping us implement those, and then we tweak them for our personal needs. But yeah, if someone hasn't opened an email in 3-4 weeks, like we stop sending to them. Then they start to get our monthly cadence. 6 months, you don't get anything. All right, let's sunset you. We actually send more emails. Like, you know how Klaviyo bills is actually, it's kind of like whatever comes first, your number of sends or your number of subscribers. We do more sends than subscribers. So we don't actually remove people, we just suppress them. But once we suppress them, that triggers an API call to a third-party direct mail service. And if that person has ever made a purchase, then we send them a discount via direct mail because we know they're sort of inactive on that channel. Oh, and then the other part of our sunset flow is like, oh, you're hearing from us too much. Do you want to opt into SMS? So we try to push them to a different owned channel.
One thing that we also have a number of brands doing that we recommend is building an actual segment of unengaged users or subscribers and then targeting them directly on social. So John, I love the example of direct mail and the tie-in. I think direct mail can be so powerful, but it's also can be costly. So on the digital side, we do see a lot of brands build that unengaged subscriber list, and then they sync that to Facebook and Instagram and try to drive engagement back through that way. So another great tactic as well.
Yeah, it's channel prioritization, right? It's lowest cost to highest cost. It's on-site, email, SMS, paid, direct mail, and you want to kind of hit, if someone's opted into every channel, you want to kind of hit them in that order. Like if someone's on your website, you don't want to pull them off your website. Another channel, if you can reach them on a cost-effective thing like email, do that. Oh, they've unsubscribed or they opted into SMS. Oh, let's push them to social, but I don't want to pay Facebook if I can reach them on a different channel. So yeah, that's big.
I think people often forget that you've already, in many cases, paid for that customer once. So trying to re-engage them and retain them. So important to definitely clean and sunset people out, but first try to win them back because you've already paid for them. So if you can spend just a skosh more to get them back, it's worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've all seen that Office scene where Ryan says it's 5 to 10 times cheaper to retain a customer than to acquire a new one, which is funny because it's actually a true stat. But you're okay spending so much to get a customer for the first time. Well, why not spend just a little bit more to keep them re-engaged? especially when you're okay doing things like repeat purchase discounts, which I think a lot of people don't look at discounts as promotional marketing spend when giving up that margin.
For the office fans out there, that happened in the episode right before he burned the cheesy pita and caused a fire.
He did, because Ryan started the fire.
That's right. Lucas, we're like BFF now.
Absolutely. I have a feeling we might just stick on this webinar for the rest of the day.
I would tune in.
There's an interesting thing John brought up about pushing people to Facebook, or sort of winding up on Facebook as the mode of engagement on the scale. I'm curious, in that interaction in Facebook, there's this balance, right, of having folks that are uninitiated with a brand being able to comment alongside folks that are brand loyalists or promoters. And how do you balance, if you're not spending against an existing customer, how do you balance having sort of that native UGC in paid search or in paid social that you would get by them being in a marketing flow in social? So I guess another way to ask this is, how do you prevent just having detractors or neutral parties in the social ad space on Instagram and Facebook?
That's a great question. I don't have a great answer for that. I don't know if anyone else does.
I was just thinking too. Philip, I don't have a great answer off the top of my head. I'd be curious to know your thoughts though.
Yeah, and my headphones were dying, so I missed the meat and potatoes of it. I just heard something about UGC native with balancing.
It's the job of the moderator to not stump the panel, so you can fire me later.
Well, I
think there's an important part here to saying, like, there's a balance, right? For a premium brand, you can certainly take some of that UGC and like it becomes positive, even if it's a negative. I'll give you an example. Every time I get somehow targeted for Tracksmith on Facebook or Instagram, I dip into the comments and 15-20% of the comments are you out of your mind, $100 for running shorts? And that makes me feel like a total baller that I have Tracksmith clothing. It's like, yeah, that's right. It's premium. So I think for a certain kind of a brand, having some detractors in the comments is not a bad thing.
And I have two examples.
Yeah, Lucas, go ahead. I'd love to hear
now that I've heard the question, because my AirPods aren't dying.
Right.
The first example is, and we see this all the time with Gorgeous, having a couple of detractors in the comments doesn't hurt you. In fact, it gives you an opportunity to answer kind of a common question about inventory or anything else. Having said that, don't let your comments, especially on your ads, be filled with detractors that are going unanswered. We see the best practice is have the question answered from one detractor and then hide the rest of the people asking that same question and respond privately. A great example is he was the coach of the Maple Leafs here, Mike Babcock, and they were selling socks called Mike Bab socks to raise money for mental health. It went absolutely viral and they ran out of socks. Now, all the comments on their ads that they continued to run were negative, saying it's a scam, wanting their money back, saying they're doing a chargeback. If they had responded to a couple of those people and said, hey, we're totally sold out, but the great news is we've been able to go back to our manufacturer, use this pre-order money and negotiate our costs down to donate more money to mental health, and we can now offer you 4 socks for the price of 3, they could have really turned that into a positive pretty easily. The second example is, and this ties in great with targeting to, say, a CrossFit audience or any audience that's really driven, is if they have an anti-audience, put a little bit of your budget towards that. So I know a few meat subscription boxes that will target 90% people who are into barbecue, 95% people into barbecue, and then 5% vegans, people who are into things like PETA. And the reason is if they have a couple of detractors against the category, so thinking of industry, category, brand, product, up at that top level, not necessarily detracting against the brand, people who aren't even customers come in and start defending that brand. So now you've done a pretty cool psychological hack to have those people associating themselves with your brand as being on that same team. Any audience where you have that joke of, hey, how do you know somebody's a vegan or into CrossFit or anything like that, you'd probably use that audience for.
I feel like if someone's a vegan or into CrossFit, they're probably more likely to tell you.
Well, that's the punchline of the joke. How do you know somebody's a vegan? How do you know somebody's into CrossFit? We'll tell you. How do you know somebody works in e-commerce right now? We'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think it prompts a good idea though, around, so because people are so willing to share information now, but we always feel that if you ask customers specifically like why they're potentially providing a negative feedback or response and creating a survey, you'd be shocked at how high the completion rates are and how willing they are to be open and transparent as to why they think something is there. So like the case of the Tracksmith gear, they may not understand the perceived value or like what you can really, why the price is set at such a price point, but it also gives an opportunity to actually build some of that feedback into the ads themselves. So sharing positive reviews directly as one of the ads, I've run some of those in my past, and you'd be surprised at how engaging they can be and how great the results are, because it's a direct testimony. It's clear, it's open, it's transparent. I think the more that brands are transparent, the better that people respond to it, especially when they do share those negative reviews, because not every product everywhere can have only 5-star reviews. It's not possible.
Yeah. There's the famous Audi ad that was like a 2-page spread that said 1 star, this car is too fast. I think you can also sort of reposition it to your benefit to a certain audience. John, I'm curious, are you doing anything to reward customers that are promoters for you in social, or are you trying to encourage them to be promoters on social in some way?
Yeah, so we have our own loyalty program that we have 1,000 different things you can do to get rewarded, and we are incentivizing sharing in your high elite gear. We're not incentivizing for comments, but occasionally we will have people come in and be like, I think when we launched our first shoe, back in 2018 or something, we had a lot of, at least getting into shoes, what is this? And we had a lot of customers kind of come to our defense, like, oh, every product they've ever made is great. I'm willing to take a chance on these shoes, even though they're more expensive or whatever. And our customer service team was like, boom, free pair of shorts for this guy, and commented, and then that got a bunch of love. And so there's different little kind of authentic ways you can do. But just really quick on that, earlier, like the brand Bird Dogs, they had a failed go at their whole thing. I've seen all their ads. It's like Mark Cuban thinks we're jackasses or something, and it's that's what they're paying. That's what they're paying to put in front of people on socials. But I have to imagine it's working for them. They wouldn't be doing it. So.
If we could, in the moments left, I definitely want to make sure we get to the Q&A. There's a bit of a grab bag here, so I want to make sure that we kind of throw it out there. Is there a best practice around the number of pieces of content that you create per week in like social media or blog or emails? Joe.
Yes, good question. We focus on the Klaviyo side of doing at least 3 blog posts per week. During the pandemic, we've done more because we've been actively sharing all the great content. But when it comes to the blog, we want to make sure that we have at least 3 pieces a week, followed by a wrap-up piece that kind of highlights what the other pieces were. And then also I've lost my train of thought, what the other pieces were, and just making sure that some folks didn't miss them, because it's easy to. And then when it comes to the actual channels, we don't have a specific cadence that we directly follow across social. We really focus on understanding where our community is. So for us right now, we have a great community following on Twitter and on Facebook. We actually have a dedicated Klaviyo Facebook community, and those are the places that we really engage with. We don't post for the sake of posting. We want to make sure that the content is really high and that people are going to find it useful and engaging. So we don't necessarily have a set number. We share based on the value of the content, and that's, if we think that people want it and people may have missed it, we'll post the same thing a few times to make sure that it's maximized its reach and as many people can find value in it.
You can post. Oh, so you can post an unlimited number of blogs on your site. like that's sort of the proving ground for us. Like, so we actually leverage, I mean, it's really awesome. We've gotten away with, getting it content from our 25,000 trainers who are stoked to be, featured. So we have endless amounts of, fitness related content, and the blog on our site is really the proving ground. And then where it gets traction on the site, that's when we, okay, that one's got something to it. Let's put that in email. Let's push that to social. So I'd say there's no limit to what you put on your site, but then self-edit down to, what's working.
Yeah, and just to play devil's advocate, the two secrets of page speed and send more emails, most people probably aren't posting enough. Don't be afraid to post something raw. It doesn't all have to be perfect. Sometimes that's what's best. So post as much as you can and figure out what's working, use that to adapt and create better content. Maybe the perfect Instagram post isn't perfect. Maybe just posting a ton to TikTok right now is where you need to be. So really post as much as you can, but I would say focus on the channels and do them properly. If you can repurpose content, do that, but don't say we need to spend a ton of time on Twitter, even though that doesn't necessarily move the needle for you compared to, say, Pinterest or YouTube.
Yeah, there's interestingly enough, there's this school of thought around overposting and how it's not even possible to overpost because algorithms kind of control the cadence at which things come into people's feeds. And if they're not interested, they're not going to see it anyway. So post as much as you can, or of what's reasonable. And I tend to subscribe to that, but I can certainly see how difficult it could be to create an endless, barrage of content that's, useful, meaningful, or aligns with brand voice and values. I can see where that would be very, very challenging. There's another question here from Jorge asking, what's a solid CPA for SMS? Joe, any data around that?
It's a great question. It's really going to vary. To be honest with you, I would look at what your current CPA is and understand exactly what you're getting from your other channels. And it should be a version of that. I've been doing a lot of research on this. It varies so widely by industry and by what you sell and by vertical. So I don't have a great answer for you on the actual CPAs that we see. It shouldn't be totally out of line with what you're getting from your main channels is the number one thing that I would gut check it by. But John or Lucas, I'm not sure if you guys have a different perspective.
I mean, we have a CPA formula, like we know we're willing to pay X up until the point, we factor in, what is it? Conversion rate, AOV, and percentage of customers that are going to repeat. So if you do that, like even if you're, are you a loss leader, are you willing to acquire this customer because 45% are going to repurchase in the next 3 months? Are you subscription? Are you a Casper mattresses and this is your one order that you're going to get from someone? So I mean, everything you're saying, like by industry, but like Google a CPA formula and make sure all the numbers make sense, that you're not losing your shirt to acquire those customers.
And that's what I was going to say, is just make sure that that it is profitable as how you're acquiring those customers. It's, if you're selling a high margin luxury good, you can spend a lot more than if you're selling t-shirts or phone cases, which I know is a bit of a filibustering answer, but ultimately, your numbers better than we do.
Yeah, it's really not a filibuster at all. I think to John's point, if you have a high repeat value, high repeat order from customers, you can just spend that much more. So it really does vary.
There's in our business at Something Digital, we'll often be asked what's a good conversion rate, to which we sort of like do the Oral-B guy, like you throw your head back. Is like, there is no one good conversion rate. It differs by, there's many conversion rates amongst customer segments in your business, amongst categories of products. And I think that that's an interesting way to approach it. I think it's a great way to answer a question that I think could be so essential, or so highly dependent on the category or the style of business that you're running. So I think that that's very good. I hope that answered the question, Jorge. And I think lastly, really, any final thoughts from our panel as we're coming up on time? Any final thoughts from the panel about, just covering the breadth of everything that's been discussed here today? If you're a brand marketer, I guess, what's the sense of the, listen, analyze, understand, communicate journey, brand voice? How do you kind of take everything that we've heard about today and put it to work in business tomorrow? Let's start with you, Joe. Give you each a final stab at this.
For me, I would say right now there's so much going on that it can be a little bit overwhelming and things are changing quickly. I always recommend go back to basics. Make sure that when I think about what could be making me money as a business owner now and later, going back, understanding what automations I have going, am I leveraging my personalization and segmentation as clearly as I can? And thinking back to all the conversation we had about brand messaging and consistency, have I really reviewed everything to be empathetic and to be aware of the situation that's presently happening? Making sure that what I do have going out, especially the automations, have been altered a little bit to just pay empathy to the situation at the moment, so it doesn't seem like you're kind of out of touch or you're tone deaf with what's happening.
Lucas, final thoughts on sort of summing up the beyond the sale idea?
Yeah, I think that now with expectations changing so rapidly, you have to be able to adapt. The same welcome flow that's been your moneymaker for ages might not be the one that you should be using right now. So be willing to adapt and don't be pot committed to anything. Just like we mentioned, if you've already spent the money to acquire a customer, but you don't want to spend any more to re-engage them, don't get pot committed of, well, I already spent the money on this customer, I already built this system and this process. The businesses we're seeing really thrive, whether it's a new essential or anything else like that, are the ones that are able to adapt quickly. And maybe it's having an SMS strategy because people are so much more on their mobile, or launching a live chat on your website, which you were on the fence about before. So don't be afraid to test things, and also be willing to adapt to really meet your customers where they are. But ultimately focus close to cash. It's very easy to want to do everything, but focus on what's actually driving sales and moving needles for your business.
I think that's always solid advice, no matter what's going on in the world. John, final word, aside from Cartful, what should people be?
I would say, like we're a pretty technical team in-house. Like I cannot say, and I said this when I was at Klaviyo Boston last year, I'll say it again here, do the development work to be able to send emails based on any action someone can take on your site. So they leave a review, they engage with the loyalty program, anything someone does, let's send them a personalized communication. And it's a little bit of heavy lifting on the development side, but it is so worth it.
Yeah, I think that's anything worthwhile takes a little bit of investment, takes some sweat equity, I believe. It's been such a great honor for me to be here with you guys, and I think that brings us right up to a couple minutes before the hour. Mary, back to you. What are our next steps?
Great. Thank you, Philip. And thank you, panel. I think that was a really engaging discussion, and it was so exciting to see everybody chiming in and really contributing to the conversation. So we did receive a few questions about the webinar recording, and yes, this has been recorded. We will be sending this out to you. You should look out for that follow-up from the Gorgeous team. Other than that, I don't think we have anything else to share. We will also be picking the 3 winners of the $150 Highly gift cards. So cross your fingers that you're one of them. And again, thank you so much for your time today, and best of luck this season.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Always a pleasure, and can't wait to see everyone in person at Klaviyo Boston, whenever that is.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.